So let me begin again. My name is Representative Whit Betts. I was telling you about how somebody approached me last night with their dog to talk about the busway issue. This is something that all of us have been approached on a regular daily basis, and it's clearly something that is very upsetting to the taxpayers and to the public. To them, it does not make any sense. It is particularly irritating to them to see that it costs so much money to build this. They're very irritated to know that we have to pay $12 to $15 million a year to subsidize it. And it's even more hard to comprehend when the goal of this busway is to operate when it's finished from 4:30 in the morning till 1:30 in the morning, which is 21 hours. And nobody believes that there's that kind of ridership to be able to support this. The reason why we're here today is we want to show and reinforce to all the folks throughout the state who have been opposing this to let them know that the fight is not over. Okay, we are here today as a group to stand up for the taxpayers, to help people get jobs in Connecticut, to help out the homeowners that have been affected by this, and we have an alternative plan that we think meets what they're looking for, and we want to make sure that these folks are acknowledged and not ignored. It's their money. It's not the federal government's money. It's not the state government's money. It's their money. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Joe Markley, and then after him, we're going to ask Mike Nicastro, the CEO and president of Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce. He's the one who really brought this issue to our attention, and I'm very grateful for him for doing that. As I am for having, this is not just a Republican effort. There are a lot of other people in committee meetings right now, but I would particularly want to thank Representative Frank Nicastro, who's also in our district. He's a Democrat. He's been able to take a very strong position on this for what, in our judgment, is the right reason. The timing, obviously, is terrible for this, and it is particularly irritating after we all either did not get refunds, paid taxes yesterday. People do not want to see their money being wasted on something like this rather than fixing our roads and bridges. So on that note, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Markley.
Thanks, Whit. I'm Joe Markley from Southington, and I just want to say a word about my history with this. I wasn't even aware of this project, I think like a lot of people in the state of Connecticut, until last year during the session when I saw the $600 million expense and wondered what it was all about. And when I looked into it, it struck me as an unwise investment of $600 million at a time when we have so many unmet needs in terms of our roads and bridges and all kinds of needs in the state of Connecticut. There's plenty of construction projects out there to keep people busy that we need desperately, not building a 9-mile busway at the cost of $1,000 an inch between New Britain and Hartford. Now, I put an amendment on the floor during the budget process late in the session. And it was kind of a Hail Mary pass. I wasn't convinced that it was germane, and Senator Looney, who I don't often agree with but I have the greatest respect for, challenged it on the floor, and in fact it was ruled out of order. I'm now working with our lawyers in the Republican caucus, and we have identified a number of bills that we can put an amendment on which I feel are beyond challenge. And I trust Senator Looney will not challenge an amendment which is placed on a bill legitimately. That means that there will be a vote on this busway, both in the House and in the Senate, by way of amendment. And we will get legislators on the record on it, for it and against it. And we will remind voters come November how those legislators voted, because we know the overwhelming majority of the people in the state of Connecticut are against this project. And I'm not convinced, I'm never convinced, that the legislature will not and cannot do the right thing. The moment is going to come when that bill is on the floor, when the amendment is on the floor, when we can say, let's move this money into other construction projects, rebuilding our existing infrastructure, instead of spending it on a whole new project that we know we don't need. Or let's not spend the money at all. Either way, we can't afford to waste $600 million. And I'd say, I know there's a lot of people from the construction trades here today. You can't believe I don't want to see you employed. It's just, this is not the project. This doesn't make sense. And it's the kind of project that, if it's built, will set back mass transit in the state of Connecticut, because it will be pointed to, just like the People Mover, for those of you who remember it up at Bradley Airport, it will be pointed to for years as a failed project, an argument against further mass transit in Connecticut. That's why I'm against it. We're also joined, let me say, by a couple of good environmentalists, Molly McKay and Richard Stowe, who were with Whit and I in the challenge that we made before environmental protection. We are going to continue that battle as well, because with all the sensitivity to the environment we have in the state of Connecticut, this was pushed through. If this is built, the one advantage to my mind of building this is I believe it will prove that I was right, that this is Governor Malloy's folly. And when he runs for re-election, let him run on this if it works. And let me run on it if it works. We'll see who was right about it. But I say, don't build this busway. Now let me...
Build it, build it, build it, build it!
Thank you very much. And let me introduce the #1 expert. Let me introduce the man who has done more to, who knows more about this project than anyone in the state of Connecticut, who really has informed me about what the project is all about. Mike Nicastro of the Central Connecticut Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks, Senator. Let me just, Senator has asked me to address a couple of issues here. So let's talk about the funding. Let's talk about economic development, because I think those are two important factors that need to be discussed here. If we're going to look at it like businessmen, if we're going to look at it like people wanting to work and put economic development back into the state, then let's look at it from that critical point of view. So let's talk about the funding. New Start's funding is $275 million. So you understand, we've not received a check from the federal government for $275 million. That's not how this works. When they signed the agreement back in October, no one handed the governor or anyone else at the Department of Transportation a check. They signed an agreement to pay them money over time. So we, all of us in this room, regardless of how we sit on this issue, are going to write the checks up front for this project going forward. We have two allocations. We have two $45 million allocations under New Starts in the President's budget over the last couple fiscal years, and possibly another $45 million, but that budget has not been passed, in the next fiscal year going forward. This means the $275 will roll to us over a period of time. We will finance it, we will pay the interest on it, and we will pay the money up front. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's how it works. Now, that said, if we don't do that project, we're not going to kid each other. We've signed this agreement. That money will go away. It will go away, and it will go somewhere else. But $130 million of it has already gone to Massachusetts. So we're already down the road with it going to somewhere else. So let's take that off the table for the time being, because it is what it is. We had our opportunity to rework the plan before signing that agreement. We could have reworked it. It has been done in other states. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that either. We could have done that work, but we chose not to. But there's more money involved. There's about another $240 million involved that could go to work right now, putting people who want to go to work in this room to work, fixing roads and bridges in this state. $120 million of it comes from our flexible highway funds, the Federal Highway Administration Funds, FHWA. That money was moved to this project with nothing more than a stroke of a pen by the executive director of a regional planning agency. Those of you in the legislature, you should be concerned. They moved $120 million with an ED from an RPA. You had no input in it. You didn't get to decide whether this made sense for the people that you represent or for the workers in this room. It just got moved. And it can as simply be moved back. But I think that process should be looked at, quite frankly. It should be understood, and how can that be done in that simple a stroke of a pen? The second piece is about another $114 to $120 million in state bonding. Connecticut's money. Well, we can decide on where that goes. We can decide whether we work on roads and bridges going forward. I think that's important for us going forward. We have a bad habit in this state, and frankly across the U.S. We like to cut ribbons. We love cutting ribbons, but we really hate maintenance afterwards. And so after we signed this agreement last fall, in January, the commissioner of DOT at a meeting in New Haven publicly stated, the roads and bridges are my nightmare. And we are now back to a status of pre-Mianus River Bridge. Now, I see a lot of gray hair in this room. Everybody remembers Mianus River Bridge. It's a danger. We can play Russian roulette with it and build this project, but it is a danger whether we like it or not. So we got to get out of this. Let's cut some more ribbons and start fixing what we have, because what we have is breaking down. And by the way, 15 years from now, who's going to be working to fix the busway when it gets ignored and becomes a maintenance nightmare in this process? Let's talk about economic development. Economic development. If we're going to build this, well, let's say we can argue it's jobs, but downstream, what's the economic development going to go forward with this? What are we going to inure from this going forward? Well, the data we've seen basically says there's not a lot from land value properties and increases. In fact, all of the data that we've pulled from the Robert Charles Lesser Corp in D.C. and from the Brookings Institute shows that in most cases around bus rapid transit, there has been no growth in economic development or in land value increases, and that affects your cities and towns and what they tax people's property at. It doesn't increase. There is a very clear correlation with the fact that it does not go up. And if you look at this plan, and if you study the map, you understand very quickly that there aren't a lot of real locations to get into from that standpoint. I've got a map here for you that I will show you to tell you that we absolutely believe that transit's important. It is important. And there are examples where bus systems work. And nobody's saying that bus rapid transit in this state's not important at some point. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but this is Curitiba, Brazil, folks. And I love Hartford, and I love my friends in New Britain, but you have to admit there's a big difference between this, look at the picture, between this and New Britain and Hartford. It's density. They have people to ride it. There has to be an economic value. Someone has to get on the bus in order to pay for this. Because the problem that we have going forward on this is that we have an ongoing cost. So when we've celebrated and we've cut more ribbons and the buses are running, beginning year one, somewhere between $11 and $12 million will be the operating deficit. People like to use the word subsidy. I guess it sounds softer. But it's an operating deficit. And it grows by 2030 to $22 million annually. So if you aggregate that up, that's $275 million more out of our pockets of roads and bridges not getting fixed. Because how are we going to pay for it? Somebody's got to pay for it. And that means those roads and bridges are not getting fixed. More construction workers not working. So we can argue about this, but where is the density to put the people on the ridership? Now, one thing that I'd love the media to please pay attention to, when you hear that there's going to be 16,000 passengers on this, ask the question deeper. There's 16,000 boardings that they are forecasting on this, 11,000 of which already exist, but the key word is boarding. A boarding, I can board the system 4 times in a day. That's 4 of the 16,000. That's not 16,000 individual entity people. And it means going out and back in the daytime. So when are we going to run this thing, and who's going to ride it? Because I tell you, did anybody have trouble getting in here today on I-84? I zipped right in. In fact, if you don't go real fast, you get run over. My wife and I were at the opening for one of the shows at Hartford Stage last Friday night. We left downtown Bristol at 10 of 7, and we were at the front door of the Hartford Stage at 7:30.
Leave at 5 o'clock and see what happens.
I've driven it for 24 years, as a matter of fact, back and forth between Bristol and Glastonbury. And I can count on one hand the number of times that I spent more than an hour. Yeah.
Well, you're fortunate to have a car because some people don't. They need that.
Understood. And would love to see you go to work.
How'd you buy your ticket?
We'd love to see you go to work.
Huh? How'd you buy your ticket?
With my money. Gentlemen, let me
That
finish.
was your money. Our money.
You don't pay me.
I don't?
No. I'm a private entity.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Look, we have a 1997 solution here. 1997 solution that we're trying to solve in 2012, and the elements have changed. It's all changed. One of the largest employers in this city, 30%, they will tell you, and I'm not saying this is right, but 30+% of their workforce is virtual. They work from home. They're not commuting into the city. We can ignore that fact, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And that's why they sell off their parking lots for millions of dollars. So the economic development on this side is not that great. It is sketchy at best, and that is a key piece to this. So we have to ask ourselves the question: if we have $3 billion in unfunded road and bridge repair necessary in this state, and we can put money toward that and put people to work, why are we doing this? Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Mike. Before we take questions, I also want to point out that part of this transaction is beginning to fall apart because, as you know, there was a developer that was very interested in building a housing component in downtown New Britain, but was unable to get the federal funding to be able to move forward, and therefore withdrew from doing the project downtown. The other thing is DOT has said they have moved the timetable now from completion from the beginning of 2014, or is it, 2014, to the end of 2014 or the beginning of 2015. So already it's beginning to slide as we speak. The point is, we want to have a healthy debate in the legislature. We want everybody to know the facts, and we want to have everybody on record as to what we think is a good use of the taxpayers' dollars, what makes the most sense when both the state and the federal government are virtually broke. And incidentally, what we have not covered is we are going to be getting a cut, in all likelihood, from federal funds when they finally adopt the budget. And one has to ask yourself, can you really count on all this money coming in? So with that, I want to thank the colleagues for coming here.